Got a little bit of designception for you today. We're redesigning the Adobe Creative Cloud app. I use this all the time to source new fonts and oftentimes work with different applications to render raw assets for my Figma designs, but I often find myself getting lost in the many different navigations they have and just not being able to do the thing I'm trying to do very quickly. As you can see here, we're dealing with 1, 2, 3 navigations and an account menu. And there's also this settings menu off to the left. There's a lot going on here. Now, I'm not trying to throw shade here. Obviously, they're doing a lot with the Adobe Creative Cloud app. There's a lot of different things trying to make themselves seen because they're important, right? So how can we rearrange this such that we get the same kind of exposure to all of the features without the clutter and the confusion? That's going to be the goal for today. So we got the style guide as always. We've just taken this straight from the app itself, just pulling it from the screenshot here. And we've got a primary color, 2 semantic colors, and we're swapping out the fonts. Instead of using the standard fonts they're using, we're going to be using, let's see, it is called, Satoshi and Carla. A really nice, kind of friendly but modern pairing. I really like Satoshi and Carla. I use it in my client projects all the time. So, in the live redesign, we've got our stories as always. Quite a lot of stories for this one here. I want to be able to view and open all my apps in one place. That's like the main use case. I want to update all my apps either one at a time or all at once. I want to learn about and install other apps of interest. Maybe there's one that I hadn't been aware of previously, and had I been aware of it, I would have wanted to use it. I want to learn about resources such as stock photos or fonts. If I have a whole bunch of Adobe stock photos, I can just quickly go to see them. If I've downloaded a lot of fonts, I can just quickly check them out. And then I want to see relevant, interesting advertisements that are tailored to me. That's kind of, I would actually probably put this story way down low because it's not, as a user, generally speaking, ads are very antithetical to what you want to be doing. But nonetheless, there is an ad in the existing UI right here. We're just going to tidy that up a little bit and perhaps reduce the profile a little bit. I also want to view my recent Adobe files, anything that I've been working on, so I can quickly get back to it. Not very many people use this feature, I can imagine. Most people open the app first and then go into the files that are associated with that application. But for the sake of completeness, I'm going to include this as well. I want to view all my fonts, activate and deactivate my fonts, enable them on third-party apps, search Creative Cloud for items that may be of interest to me, so just reproducing the search feature, which you can see here. And then I want to control my account menu notifications, the whole shebang that's in the top right. And then, of course, we've got this advertisement one, which I just moved down to the bottom. So those are the stories. Quite a lot of stories. So I'm expecting this one will take a little longer than a typical design. So going to get stuck in there. And then Future Mark's going to splice this together so it's a little more fun to watch. But hang in there, folks. Stick with me, and I'll see you in a couple hours. When I'm redesigning a product UI, unlike what you would normally see on the web in like just a simple marketing website, I almost always start with a very low fidelity wireframe where I'm just figuring out, generally speaking, where the main content and navigation components are going to live. If I do this, I find that it's a lot easier to make the smaller decisions because I'm not worrying about the big picture stuff anymore. I've kind of agreed that we're going to do primary navigation on the left, content body on the right, a title, secondary navigation, and then I can just kind of tackle each design problem in chunks based on kind of which part of that wireframe it fits into. So highly recommend doing this if you're ever feeling overwhelmed by a product UI, if you're kind of just completely rehashing an entire screen. Here I'm actually going through and reproducing the Windows default system bar, and given that that's more or less, you don't really change that at all, I'm just going to skip through this and get straight to the header. I figured instead of hiding away the system menu in the hamburger icon like the previous UI did, we could just bring it out and show users exactly what's available to them. This heuristic's been established with pretty much every Windows app these days, so I think we can get away with it. And fortunately, given that we can control those UI elements, we can just combine it with the account and notifications part of the UI on the right here. Given that kind of changing this too much would probably result in an enormous amount of friction for users, I'm just taking the existing position of the primary navigation, being on the left side of the application, and persisting that for now. But instead of doing what was done previously, I'm taking all of the sporadic little extra bits of navigation and I'm just combining them into this one interface. So for instance, now there's no separate files link somewhere on the page in the content body that takes you to a different part of the UI or a different fonts link. It's all in the left sidebar and it's clearly primary, with the secondary menu coming a bit later. So that is an appropriate place to place that kind of stuff. I'm also putting search over here because we're kind of sending or making a contract with the user that the primary controls are going to be on the left. And if you're doing a global search, it should also be on the left. So just kind of makes sense to put that there as well. I think it's also important to note here that you'll see the active state is a subtle blue with a darker blue on top of it. That's a really good way to emphasize something to the user, but not really emphasize it. So if you ever have something like a state that you need to indicate to the user, indicate to them that this is an active state, for instance, but you don't necessarily want them to like click on it or anything, doing something like this is a good halfway point where you use a much more transparent background with the same hue and then a very saturated color for the text. Now, I did lose a little bit of footage here, so you're going to see the content header just kind of pop in here. But it's following some heuristics that veterans of the channel will probably already understand. The title of the section that has been selected is big and bold. That's the first thing I want users' eyes to go to. They can confirm they're looking at the right section. And it also describes what you should expect to see in the content body. And then I've got secondary navigation here, which allows users to kind of tweak what they're looking at. You can switch between installed applications, favorite applications, those that need updates, and then perhaps some suggested applications to do a little bit of advertisement for Adobe. Although I really liked the application list table in the existing UI, there was one thing in particular I really wanted to change, and that was the use of color to indicate to the user whether or not an application had an update available. In the existing UI, if an application was up to date, there was a little green status icon next to it, which is fine. Green means good, no action required. But if an update was required or available, there was a blue icon next to it. And the problem with that is that's two very saturated colors. They're both pulling my attention. If instead we want to just only pull the user's attention when there is something relevant and useful to display to them, then we only want to use saturated color when there's an update available. So instead, the default state just uses a gray status icon to indicate, hey, everything's operational, we don't need your attention. And the only time we introduce color is when perhaps there's an error or a pending update that requires the user's action. I was also a little confused as to why there was no control on the application table here to just update everything that had an update available. I had to go to a different page, a dedicated updates page for that. And that felt a little clunky and somewhat unnecessary. So here I'm trying to figure out an appropriate treatment to place a button on the screen somewhere that just allows us to update everything at once and just get all of the action items that you're kind of thinking about seeing all this color sorted. Let's get everything updated at once. Honestly, the existing little ad, the inline ad that appeared in the All Applications view on the existing UI really wasn't that bad. It didn't really distract that much, but it pushed a lot of the content quite a ways down the screen. And if I come here to this screen, it's very likely I want to do something with the actual items on the screen. So we can achieve the same effect or a similar effect, meaning we can make users aware of our promotional material without moving everything so far down the screen by just having a nice subtle blue ad banner fitting in at the top of the page that users can dismiss when they, if they're not interested in it. So we're still advertising to them, right? But we're not completely obstructing the intention of the page. Here I wanted to figure out a way that we could display very long lists of fonts to the user, fonts that have been installed from the Adobe suite, but may or may not be active on the user's computer at any given moment. The existing UI has everything expanded, showing all of the child fonts and variations of the font, and it's extremely difficult to use. So instead, just radically simplifying all of this and giving users some very easy controls to do quick manipulations to the fonts on their account without totally overwhelming the vertical space available on the application. And then finally, I'm adding a little bit of polish here by adding in a little spinner that will animate on the screen when an application or a font is updating, and then having the toast notification slide in from the right and then automatically close on its own using the custom interactions that are available to us in the Figma animation suite. And I'll link you to the animated spinner in the description of the video because it's really cool and the creators obviously done a wonderful job at making it nice and smooth. All right, so hopefully this doesn't get my Figma account banned, but I really feel like this would be a much simpler UX and, to me personally, a more polished UI, and I'd like to use something like this if I was using the Adobe Creative Cloud. But why is it better, right? Of course, there's subjective opinion here, but I think that all things considered, this navigation kind of encapsulates all of the primary functions of the site in one place, as opposed to having them scattered across various different UIs. And there's a very clear parent-child relationship between these navigations. This one is obviously the primary one, because when you change it, this one changes, and this persists no matter where you are in the UI. So this is where people are going to lean on when they're trying to navigate through the application. But then if they want to drill down further and just like tweak the perspective a little bit, that's when the secondary navigation comes into play. We've also got a nice cheeky little mechanism to update everything from the all applications view without needing to go to a dedicated updates view, with some sexy little toast notifications. I really love the Figma component animations that you can add nowadays. They're so robust. And then the fonts overview, I think, is just simply much easier to use and understand. Currently, their fonts UI is really cumbersome. You have to like collapse everything to see all the fonts. They're not sorted by any particular attribute. You'd imagine sorting by name or maybe install date would make sense. And then you can simply enable the third-party apps if you want to, just right here, and enable the overall font right there. And yeah, I mean, again, I'm really partial because I designed this, but I do think this is significantly better than the previous UI. So let me know what you think. Maybe I'm totally off the deep end here. And if you have any suggestions that you think would have made this UI even better, I'd love to hear them as well. But until next week, I hope you found some value in this one, and have a great day.